In this video, we will review the responses that you should have had for Unit 5 Personal Progress Check Part 2. So this chapter was about using classes and writing methods for classes. And problem number 1 says the following class represents an invitation to an event. The variable host name represents the name of the host for the event, and the variable address represents the location of the address. Now you can notice in the class, both of these are private string type variables. Then we have a constructor for the invitation class. And the reason I know this is a constructor is because it has the same name as the class, and there is no return type. So that's how you can tell when something's a constructor. They're passing two parameters here, string n and string a. N becomes the host name, a becomes the address. So the first part to this question says, write a method for the invitation class that returns the name of the host. So basically, what they're asking for here is an accessor method that's going to return the host name, because remember, the host name is a private variable, so the only way we can get to it is by running through an accessor method. So the first thing that you want to understand is if the idea is to access the host name, we need to make this public because we're probably going to be calling it from outside of this class. The return type here should be string because that's what the host name type variable was. It was a string. And you're probably going to want to call the method something that resembles the idea of going and getting the name of the host. So get host name would be a very appropriate name for this method. The one and only thing this method should do is return the host name. Now remember, host name was a class variable, so you can use it in any of the methods of the class, and the type of variable that host name is a string, which matches the return type that you said you were going to return. The next part to this question says to write a method for the invitation class that accepts a parameter and uses it to update the address for the event. So basically what this part of the question number 1 is they're asking you to write a mutator or modifier method. Its sole job is to change the value of one of the class variables, in this case, the address. Now, thinking back to the class, address was a string type variable, so the parameter that we must be passing into this mutator method must be a string type variable. So let's take a look and see what the solution for this should look like. So for part B, we've got public void, because I'm not going to return anything here. The job of this method is to just change the address. So you could name the method anything you want. I called mine update address. You could call it change address, but it has to take a string type variable, and you can call the parameter name anything you want. And basically inside of this method, you want the whatever parameter you passed in here as the representative string that's going to become the new address to be set equal to address. Remember, assignments always go from right to left, so the new address will be assigned into your class variable address. Oh, by the way, one thing, if you're planning on making this the same name as the class variable, then you've got to use the proper this. You would want this.address equals, if you decided to call this parameter address, you would want this.address, the class variable address, equal to address. Part C of this method says to write a method for the invitation class that will accept the name of a person who is being invited as a string parameter and return a string consisting of the name of the person being invited, along with the name of the host and the location of the event. Now, the name of the host and the location of the event are class variables that we're storing, but the name of the person being invited is not, and that's why we have to pass that in as a string type parameter. For example, if the name of your host is Karen and the party location is 1234 Walnut Street, and the person being invited is Cheryl, the method should return a string with the following format. Dear Cheryl. Now, Cheryl is the parameter that we passed in for the person who's being invited. Please attend my event at 1234 Walnut Street is the address of the person who's hosting the party. See you then, Karen. Karen's the host name. So let's take a look at what the solution for this should look like. The first thing is that you want to pass in a parameter right here, string type variable for the name of the attendee. And we're going to return a string. So the idea here is that we're going to put together a sentence that says, dear, and then we're going to add in, concatenate in the name of the attendee that we're inviting. And then we're going to concatenate on the end of that, comma, please attend my event at, and then we'll add on to that our address. Remember, that's a class variable, so we can access it from anywhere within the class. See you then, and then we're going to add on our host name and a period. So this builds a string for the sentence and then returns it using the attendee that we're inviting and the host address and the host name. So we're just putting it all together by using concatenation. Part D for this problem says a student has written the following one-parameter constructor to be included in the invitation class. The method is intended to construct a new invitation object that sets the address to the value of the parameter and sets the host name to a default value of host. The constructor does not work as intended, so let's take a look and see what they're doing. Public invitation string address, and then they're trying to make address equal to address and host name equal to host. The main problem here is that they're using the same name for their parameter as they are for their class variable. So their local parameter and their class variable have the same name. This is what the main issue is, and this is why this student's constructor does not work properly. Remember, if Java sees two things that are the same name, it uses the local variable in both places. So this is trying to set the local variable address equal to the local variable address. So the actual class address variable never gets changed. So the correct way to do this, there are two options. Either change the name of your variable that you're passing in as a parameter to something different. That way Java will know that A is the address that we're passing in, and this address is the class variable address. Or if you don't want to do that, if you really absolutely want to keep the same name for your parameter as your class variable, that's when you have to use the word this. So this dot address equals address. This dot address refers to the class variable address, whereas regular address is your local variable. So this would take the local variable parameter for address and set it equal to the class variable parameter, the class variable. The second free response question says that this question involves the implementation of password generator class, which generates strings containing an initial password for an online account. The password generator class supports the following functions. So you should be able to create a password consisting of a specified prefix, then followed by a period, and then randomly generated numerical portion of a specified length. The second thing it should support is creating a password consisting of a default prefix with an A, capital A, followed by a period, and then a randomly generated numeric portion of a specified length. And it should also be able to report to us how many passwords have been generated. The following table contains sample code execution and the corresponding results. So if you call the password generator, if you create a password generator and call new password generator, so it looks like they're passing an integer followed by a string, then this should create a password with the prefix CHS followed by a period and then 4 randomly generated digits. Using that object, PW1, that we just created, they want to call PW count, which should return the number of passwords. And so far it's been 0 because we haven't actually created a password yet. Password1.pwgen is actually going to generate a password using that prefix CHS, and this 3900 must be the random numbers that were generated. 4 random numbers, that's what was specified as the length for the digits part. pw1.pwgen is generating a second password with that prefix and that specified number of decimal places. And if you did pw1.pwcount right now, there would have been 2 passwords that we generated, 1, 2. Now they're going to create a second password generator object called PW2. They're calling new, and this particular password generator constructor, they're only passing the number of digits. So that means this must be the one that uses the A as the prefix followed by a period, and then in this case, 6 digits that are randomly generated. So pw2.pwcount should still be 2. Just because we've specified how many digits and what the prefix is doesn't mean we've actually created passwords yet. This method right here, pwgen, is the one that actually generates passwords. So pw2.pwgen generates a password with A as the prefix, followed by a dot, followed by 6 different integer digits that were randomly generated, 843055. And then, now you don't set it to this, that's just a possible password that it could have been generated. Same thing for those up there. At this point, if you took a look at how many passwords were generated, there would have been 3. 1, 2, 3. 2 on the PW1 and 1 on the PW2. So one of the things that points out to me that hopefully everybody understands is the PW count is not specific to a particular object of this class. It belongs to the class in general. So whether I'm using PW1 or PW2, I should be able to add to the total PW count. Okay, so let's take a look at the solution for this class. Here's the code that I came up with for question 2. Some things you could change the names of, but some things have to be the way that we've specified. So public class password generator, that has to look exactly like that because this was the name of the class, password generator. There are 3 things that you're going to want to keep track of in here, and I've made all of them privates. You're going to want an integer for PW count. Now, this needs to be a static variable because it doesn't belong to one particular password generator object. It is for the entire class, so you need this to be static. And we're going to start that off at 0. 0 passwords have been created at this point. We need a private int for the password length. Now that password length is going to be sent to us through the constructor. And a private string for the prefix. And again, that's going to be either passed to us through the constructor or it's going to be assigned to be an A depending on which constructor they're going to call. So next you're going to see that I have 2 different password generator constructors. Again, this has to look like this, public password generator, no return type, same name as the class for constructors. Now one of my constructors has to pass both a length and a prefix. So len will become the password length and pre will become the prefix that comes in front of the dot. The other password generator constructor just takes a length. And for that particular one, len becomes the password length, but the prefix here is defaultly assigned to A. So these are our 2 different constructors that we have for this class, one that takes 2 parameters and one that only takes 1 parameter. Now, passwords aren't actually generated until you call the pwgen function. This method right here is the one that actually creates passwords. And passwords are strings, so you're going to want to return a string type out of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off with a string. I'm going to call it temp, and we're going to start that off to be the prefix plus the dot. So whatever the prefix was assigned to be, it's going to start off with that prefix and then the dot. And then I'm going to create a for loop, starting off at 0, going up to but less than the length of the password, incrementing by 1s. And I'm going to concatenate onto the string variable temp the numbers that I create randomly. So check out what I'm doing here. We're doing math.random, which is going to create a number between 0 and 1. We're going to multiply that by 10, so that means I now have integers between 0 and 9.9999999. And then we're going to typecast it as an integer to truncate any possible decimals. So now what that means is what's on the right-hand side of this will create integers 0 through 9. And we're going to do that as many times as the length of the password needs to be for the digit parts. So if they pass 4, I'll create 4 random digits and add them onto the end of the prefix. If it's 6, I'll create 6 random digits and add them onto the end of the prefix. Now another thing that needs to happen here is after you've generated a password, you need to add 1 to the password count. This is the static variable that's keeping track of how many passwords have been created. And then you're going to want to return temp so that that string actually comes back so that you can see what was created. Now, one more thing that we need in this class is we do need an accessor method for the PW count. Since we made that static variable private, if somebody's asking how many passwords have been created, we need an accessor to actually return that number for us. So this would be the solution to question number